Good evening. Hello, I'm Joe Wren.
And I'm Bob Zaltzberg.
Today was the great American eclipse, and the cosmic spectacle did not disappoint, Bob. The celestial display was at least partially visible across most of the continent.
Among the best places to see the eclipse, Joe, was right here in Indiana. There was so much anticipation heading into today. For weeks, state officials have been saying to expect the largest crowds in state history. Coming up, we'll see whether the crowds lived up to that hype, but the weather certainly did cooperate, and central Indiana was rewarded with a perfect view of the total solar eclipse.
Oh boy, people are calling it life-changing, worldly. Bob, do you have any good descriptions?
You know, magnificent, historic. I guess those are about as good as I can do.
I just think it's really interesting that a bunch of people gather for an event like this, and I mean, it is very special. It's a rare thing, so it's cool to see.
That's William Tatulis. He goes to school at IU, but he's from Madison, Wisconsin. His parents drove to Bloomington to watch the eclipse because their house wasn't in the path of totality.
Interesting. We talked to so many people today. What a great day. Tonight we have team coverage from around central Indiana. Let's get started. I believe, are we going to Lake Monroe? We have a view folks had watching the eclipse over the water. Ethan Sandweiss joins us from where he spent the day at Paintown.
I'm at Lake Monroe with videographer Devin Ridgway. Earlier this afternoon, people watched from tents, boats, and beaches as the sun disappeared. Some families have been camping all weekend at the Paintown recreation area. John Clark came with his daughter Abby and two sons, Gabe and Eli.
Just hoping that my brother doesn't take off his glasses.
Yes, we're going to be safe first and foremost. But yeah, I've heard the same thing. It's something you have to really experience, and that it's not, you can't really describe it. It's got to be an in-person thing.
Others, like B. Chris and her little sister Josie, watched from pontoon boats.
Doing a polar plunge.
I'm excited to drive the boat. No, I'm not quite sure if I am, but I'm probably going to drive it.
The Indiana DNR has been preparing for the event for years. Jill Vance, interpretive naturalist for Lake Monroe.
We're doing pinhole projector builds behind me right now. We're going to have stations set up to help people view the eclipse this afternoon. We've even got a telescope to look through, and we're going to kind of have a s'mores campfire tonight to wrap things up.
For over 4 minutes, the lake was cast into twilight. People stared from the water and beaches through telescopes, eclipse glasses, and during totality, their bare eyes. Some families describe the event in almost spiritual terms. Josh Darling and his son Brantley say this is an experience they'll remember the rest of their lives.
It was just amazing. I loved it.
Honestly, one of the most blissful things I've ever seen once it hits totality. It is amazing. It's something like you can't imagine it at all.
Rick Nelson drove out here with his grandkids. He sees the eclipse both as a unique experience and a teaching opportunity.
We were out in southwest Utah and drove across specifically to see the eclipse. And you know, my hope, these kids are being raised to have a respect for nature, and when we get this many people into a state park like that, you know, it's an opportunity to educate people about how you should interact with nature.
Many sky gazers are trickling out of the campgrounds, but others will stay overnight to continue enjoying the lake. Reporting from Lake Monroe, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
Yeah, and the state park has a lot of activities planned into the evening. Bob, there's a campfire, s'mores. You like s'mores?
Oh yeah, I like s'mores. Yeah, that's all part of the effort to keep people to stay around a while. One of the big concerns leading up to today was a mass exodus and traffic backups. Totality is more than 3 hours ago, and it seems quiet here in Bloomington. Lucas Gonzalez has been talking to the police, first responders, and city officials all day. He's here with us now. Lucas, the zone of totality stretched across southern Indiana. How'd things go?
Yeah, so hi Joe, hi Bob. So yeah, I've been checking in with police as well as just being out in the field all day. And from what I saw, honestly, it was pretty quiet most of the day. You know, officials worked really hard the last several weeks to prepare people for traffic and potential delays. Schools were closed, IU canceled classes, and urged employees to work remotely or even take the day off. and all the efforts to prevent gridlock seemingly worked. I spoke to ISP about an hour ago, and they said that honestly, traffic was surprisingly light all day today. There weren't any serious traffic incidents resulting in injury. If they had crashes, they were mostly property damage. Shortly after the eclipse, they told me that as people were heading back up northbound from on I-69, it picked up a little bit, but nothing too out of the ordinary, and no notable crashes either. Up in Indianapolis, they said that, again, around the same time, it was a little heavier now that people were leaving the city, but again, no major crashes, and they both said that they got less than they were expecting. Typical traffic, just slightly heavier than usual. As well as here in town, I spoke to IU police. They said that thankfully things went pretty smoothly most of the day. They told us that we weren't seeing a lot of traffic. There was one accident on the bypass. No one was hurt, thankfully. But overall, things went smooth, and yeah, across the board, people told me that they got a lot less traffic than they were expecting.
Everybody was talking about 300,000 people. I don't think, Bob, we saw that today in Bloomington, at least. If anything, people seem to be more spread out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all worried about whether we were even going to be able to get to work today. I think a lot of people were concerned about that, and that just never transpired.
Yeah, that's true. And, being out in the field as well, we were kind of anticipating that we were going to have some trouble getting around town. That wasn't true in our experience, honestly. We started the day here on campus, so we were at Kirkwood. We went out near the bypass to see what traffic was like there. It was pretty quiet, honestly. Starting the day, was actually a little quieter than a normal day, at least by the bypass. And on Kirkwood, things were busy, but not overwhelmingly busy. We went out to Switchyard later and didn't really have that much trouble finding parking even. So yeah, it definitely seems like a lot quieter than everyone was sort of expecting.
I will say I did get an email from Columbus, Nancy Wagner there, City Hall. They had a command center set up, and she said there was no traffic issues in Columbus. There was no influx of people like they thought. Everything there seemed well. I will say Indiana State Police did say very heavy traffic on South I-65. But back to Bloomington, though, we did talk to an Andrew Felreese who drove more than 9 hours from Damascus, Maryland with his 2 kids.
If you haven't seen the eclipse or experienced totality, it's a really once-in-a-lifetime event. So we're going to do it at least twice in a lifetime. It was an amazing experience in 17 when we did it.
Yeah, that was Andrew Felreese from Damascus, Maryland. He was one of several people that we talked to today from across the country. We even talked to people from abroad. We talked to people from Seattle, California, Maryland. The city hosted its main event today at Switchyard. People started showing up around 5 this morning to set up their lawn chairs, lay out blankets. We even saw some people charging for food and water, taking advantage of the big crowds today. So, people drove down from Chicago last night. One person said it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. He put his camper on top of his car and got into town around midnight. That's Link Lathreach.
It's kind of miraculous. There's nothing else like it in the world, and I think seeing the sun, just how bright it is, makes you appreciate it all the more. The corona outside of it is the purest white you'll see in your entire life.
Lathreach says that he went to Oregon to see the 2017 eclipse, and as you know, this year some eclipse events, like in Texas, for instance, got canceled at the last minute because of the potential for bad weather. For eclipse chasers, it's sort of a gamble trying to decide whether to go for the best view, but coming to Bloomington really paid off.
Okay, well, thanks for all that reporting today. What a day. Arguably the most anticipated watch party was at IU's Memorial Stadium. Grammy-winning artist Janelle Monáe performed. Star Trek's Captain Kirk made an appearance. Solar enthusiasts showed up before dawn this morning. Kylie Lichter joins us from the stadium now with more.
Hi, Joe. It has been a wild day at the stadium, and although the eclipse was the main draw for today's events, the performers also did not disappoint. By early afternoon, several hundred people had already filed into the stadium to make sure they had a good seat for the eclipse. Ryan Rotman was among the out-of-towners who traveled to Bloomington. He drove up from Louisville with his wife and 2 young children.
Yeah, we've been teaching them, kind of like what it's all about. He's really big into space, so the whole concept of the moon, the sun, all of it, yeah.
Rotman graduated from IU and also did a graduate degree, so he spent 8 years at the university.
I've never really been in a full one, so I'm expecting it to be just dark and you'll be able to see stars in the middle of the day, which is kind of a weird concept.
As the crowd eagerly awaited the eclipse, Mae Jemison, the first woman of color in space, talked about being a young girl growing up on the south side of Chicago. Jemison compared the eclipse to her time in space. Star Trek actor William Shatner, aka Captain Kirk, read a story about how the Earth was created and how everything that's happened led up to today's eclipse.
The moon is going to block the view of the sun to a small group of people on Earth, and we're among the lucky ones. What we are witnessing this afternoon is so filled with mystery and awe and chance and luck and maybe divine intervention, we just don't know. So we can ascribe it to the magic of nature. In this magic moment that we are sharing today, where because of places like Indiana University educating us what is happening, we are filled not with dread of something strange, but filled with awe at the manifestations of the heavenly bodies and the incidents, the coincidences, that what is about to happen, this compelling scientific happenstance for which there is no other explanation but that science is magic and magic is science. And now, the eclipse!
In 2021, Shatner became the oldest person to fly into space at 90 years old. Shatner spoke up until about 10 minutes prior to totality, then the crowd put on their glasses and started looking up at the moon crossing in front of the sun. When darkness began to fall, Memorial Stadium was silent. The MC counted down to the peak eclipse and then roaring applause. Retired science teacher Jeff Dinner drove in from Raleigh, North Carolina. It was about an 11-hour drive. He says the eclipse puts life into perspective.
It just lets you know that we think we're all big and bad and intelligent, and we are, but we're just a very small part of this vast universe, and we need to understand and appreciate that.
Dinner's son got engaged during the 4 minutes of totality at the stadium.
Our son, like I said, lives here. He went to IU, okay? He graduated here, but he just got engaged during totality. He sure did. He just proposed to his longtime girlfriend up on the balcony over there during totality.
The festivities ended with a concert by Grammy-nominated artist Janelle Monáe.
Janelle Monáe, obviously. Yeah, definitely Janelle Monáe. Also, I think it's just so exciting to be able to see it from the stadium, the solar eclipse like that. It's like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I'm just so lucky that Janelle Monáe, of all people, is here to experience everything.
There are a few cars left in the stadium, but everything cleared out pretty quickly. From Memorial Stadium, with Lucinda Larnick as videographer, I'm Callie Lichter.
It's worth noting that Janelle Monáe was a space scientist in the movie Hidden Figures. With today's clear skies, it sure turned out to be a prime spot to watch the eclipse.
Yeah, according to NASA, nearly 99% of the U.S. population got to experience at least a partial eclipse today, but the totality in central Indiana was longer than practically everywhere else. Earlier today, I spoke with Katie Pilichowski, who is the chair of IU School of Astronomy. Let's just begin with your immediate reaction to, okay, first of all, is this your first totality?
This is my third totality.
Third.
And this is the best. Absolutely the best by far.
Why is it the best?
Well, it's the longest. We could see both Jupiter and Saturn. There was a lovely prominence down below. It was just, the corona was beautiful. The sun is active, things are happening. It was just gorgeous.
Can you believe this weather too today?
I woke up this morning and looked out. It was clear. Wow, we are so lucky.
What else? What were you looking for specifically? This being your third, like this was my first, and I didn't know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
What were you looking for? This being your third.
Well, the difference from the last one when the corona was very weak, this time we had a beautiful, strong corona because the sun is very active right now. So looking for that, looking for all of the things that I've been aware of in thinking about this eclipse for a while. So effects on the environment, the crickets that sort of popped out, the birds, like a few of them sort of started chirping. We heard the fireworks, the cheering, all of that stuff that just adds to the experience of this remarkable event.
And it wasn't just seeing it, it felt colder. You could really
The
feel
temperature drops. The actual temperature drops. It drops before totality, and it keeps dropping a little bit after. Walking over here, I could feel the air was a lot cooler than it was before the eclipse started. The temperature really dropped. I don't know how much, but it certainly felt cooler.
What are scientists and astronomers right now doing with this data from this totality?
Well, right now they're cheering and relaxing and saying, yay, we got it. But what they will do with the data is look at basically the extent of the corona, the specific distribution of the light of the corona. There are experiments going on that measure the polarization of the corona, of the plane of the light as it comes to us. And that will tell us a little bit more about what forms the corona, why it's as hot as it is. We know that the corona has a temperature of about 2 million degrees. It's much hotter than the sun underneath it. So why does it get so hot? How does that energy get transferred up in the corona? This eclipse will help answer some of those questions.
What about people who saw this and are so motivated or moved by it and want to do this more?
Again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes a habit, a hobby that people have of eclipse chasing. Unfortunately, we don't have more eclipses in North America until the 2040s, but that doesn't mean there aren't eclipses elsewhere that people travel to. There are always opportunities every year or two to see an eclipse. People get hooked and they just go to see as many as they can.
But there are also other opportunities to take part in astronomy, right?
Oh, constantly. Right. We all enjoy looking at the moon. Kirkwood Observatory is open Wednesday nights. We welcome people to come in. We look at the moon, we look at the planets, we look at stars and star clusters. There are always ways to enjoy astronomy.
It's been a busy day. What are you going to do now?
Oh, I'm going to take a nap.
Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
So I spent about an hour out in the Arboretum before and then during the eclipse, talked to several people, and they were all visiting from out of town. Didn't really talk to anyone, though, from Indiana. I think the closest was probably Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, Gary Wilson flew in from Camarillo, California, with his wife to watch the eclipse. He also saw the last one in 2017 in Oregon. He says this time was different.
This time I didn't freak out quite as much because I knew what to expect because I'd seen one before, but it was spectacular here.
You know, Wilson was excited to watch such a rare event take place and took a sequence of pictures during the eclipse.
I was focusing a little too much on my cameras and trying to get pictures of it, but fortunately with the time, 4 minutes, I did manage to look up at it several times.
Now, Ted Bear is another person, or Ted Bear, I'm sorry, another person we talked to today who could be classified as an eclipse chaser. Now, like Wilson, he watched the last eclipse in Oregon. He flew into Chicago from Tacoma on Friday with his 2 kids. They looked at the weather forecast, decided their best bet for good weather was to drive south to Bloomington.
The last eclipse, you can't describe it in words. Video doesn't capture it. You have to be there live, and it was such a mind-blowing, you can almost describe it as a spiritual experience, that we just had to do it again.
Bear says now he's looking for an excuse to travel to northern Spain in 2026 for the next eclipse. And Bob, I know you and a lot of the behind-the-scenes news folks all watched it from the Arboretum, but what about you?
Well, I stayed home, but I walked my dog before the eclipse, right by Bryant Park. About 30 minutes before the eclipse began, I'd estimate there were a few hundred people in the park. I walked past about a half a dozen lawn parties my neighbors were having. You know, for me, it was just a really cool experience. Had my Wonder Lab eclipse glasses off and on until the moment of totality. I was disappointed I couldn't see anything through the glasses anymore, but then I took them off and wow, you know, the actual view of the moon with the sun's rays around it was awesome. And that's a word I think is highly overused, but in this case, I think it was appropriate.
Yeah, just because you mentioned it and we got a lot of questions about it prior to the eclipse, so I have to ask, how did your dogs react to the eclipse?
The dogs, you know, they were great. As our guest Liz Aguilar said on Noon Edition, they have enough sense not to look at the sun. One of them barked at some of the neighbors that were having a watch party nearby, but other than that, they were pretty much unfazed.
So Bob, you mentioned Noon Edition. You hosted a show about the eclipse last Friday that was live from the Wonder Lab. Did anything they say kind of prepare you for today?
You know, I was not prepared for what I saw when I took off those eclipse glasses for totality. I think I was prepared for the quick change from dimmer sunshine to total darkness, and then the change back after totality, because we talked about that on Friday. I really loved hearing on Friday about the history of the last eclipse in Bloomington, the one that was in 1869, and realized that people will be talking about this one, that might even be watching this show 130 years from now to see what we witnessed. And I learned that city officials did a great job of preparing for a massive influx of people. I guess I was a little disappointed that not nearly as many people as estimated showed up here.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting when we get numbers on how many people did visit Bloomington in central Indiana. I have to say, I just can't get over how it seemed to end so abruptly, go back to sunny skies. It was dark, and then as soon as the dot of the sun started peeking out again, it seemed to go back to daylight. So I want to go across town now to the Monroe County Fairgrounds in anticipation of today's eclipse. Folks started camping out there this weekend. Reporter Benta Boutier got to the fairgrounds early this morning and joins us now with more. Benta.
The Monroe County Fairgrounds were originally planned for a 3-day festival with bands and camping leading up to the eclipse. But after that was canceled, it became one of the more low-key locations for viewing in Monroe County. Videographer Clayton Baumgarth and I arrived today around 8 a.m. and viewers started to trickle in around 10 a.m. Among the first to arrive at the fairgrounds today were a group from Virginia and Kentucky. Ryan Gomez left Saturday to pick up Connor and Alita Farnsworth in Kentucky before making the final stretch to Bloomington today. They met online during the pandemic lockdown and became friends over a video game. Gomez says the eclipse was a good reason to get together.
The opportunity presented itself, and you know, they live in Kentucky, so I was like, how about I come over to your place and then we go up and see the eclipse?
Hobbyists and professionals with their own telescopes parked for free at the fairgrounds. A former middle school science teacher, Linda Ross, traveled with her daughter 6 hours from Michigan. She also traveled for the eclipse in 2017.
Well, I wanted to come, obviously, always. She finally called me, I don't know, in the fall and said, oh, do you want to go to the eclipse? Are you kidding me? Of course I want to go to the eclipse, you know?
They drove in Saturday. Ross wanted to avoid crowds at the IU Stadium and likes that she got to have a low-key atmosphere with her daughter.
I wish I could describe it, and this is the perfect setting. As I was telling you earlier, I heard about this big, hoopla they were supposed to have, and I wouldn't have came here for sure, 100%. That's not what I wanted. Imagine that atmosphere compared to this.
She and her daughter will make the drive back to Michigan tonight. There will be a total eclipse in Alaska in 2033, and Ross says she'll go if she's able. The fairgrounds today had 3 food trucks. Fairgrounds President Jake Conrad says turnout was what they expected, and he's happy with it. He says there were about 100 cars with 3 to 4 people each. For WTIU News, I'm Benta Boutier.
Now, last month we brought you a story from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the proclaimed Eclipseville in 2017. The Jiffy treat in Ellettsville could qualify as our area's Eclipseville this year. Sitting on the exact center of the path of totality, its time in darkness was just about the longest in the state. Aubrey Wright joins us.
The last eclipse.
I'm here at Jiffy Treat in Ellettsville. It's the epicenter of the total solar eclipse in Monroe County. The eclipse here was about 4 minutes and 2 seconds long. It was a perfect sunny day for ice cream. The shop is taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event. Jiffy Treat has its usual menu items like homemade ice cream, soft serve, and quick eats, but they planned plenty of specials for the eclipse crowd. They're commemorating the eclipse with custom Jiffy Treat t-shirts, complete with their signature ice cream cone logo. They also added 6 eclipse-themed ice cream specials. Manager Casey Pace says they hosted polls and crowdsourced the best flavors for the eclipse.
So we've been preparing for months for this.
Jiffy Treat started planning for the eclipse in January. Pace says they knew this would be a big deal and it's all hands on deck. 35 staff members were on the job Monday. Though the shop stayed busy throughout the day, staff did stop serving to watch the eclipse. Jiffy Treat is family owned, and Pace says she's thankful for the community's support.
And thankful to like I said, the community, and that people are traveling from miles and miles, different states, to be here at our little town ice cream shop.
I mean, it's dark, but it's not. Here we go. It's gone.
Pam Olberg traveled to Jiffy Treat with her family from Minnesota. It took 2 tanks of gas, but they said it was worth it. They even modified their own welder's goggles to watch the sun. Olberg says her family saw an eclipse in 2017, but this one is better and longer.
And we were so enthralled that the minute we heard there was going to be another one, everybody just said, we've got to go.
They preferred to watch away from a big city, and they ended up at Jiffy Treat because it had parking, bathrooms, and good food. Olberg says everyone should experience an eclipse if they have the chance.
If you're young and you've got children and you've got a chance for the next one, go.
Reporting from Ellettsville with videographer George Hale, I'm Aubrey Wright.
Only 6 years passed between the 2017 eclipse and today's great American eclipse, but we're going to have to wait a lot longer for the next one. The next total solar eclipse visible from North America will be in 2044.
The Eclipse 2024 special is made possible in part by IU Credit Union, offering mobile access to IU Credit Union accounts, helping account holders check balances, transfer funds, and pay bills through their mobile devices. Available in the IU Credit Union apps for iPhone and Android, and by WTIU members. Thank you.